My brothers and sisters, welcome to episode number 89 in the Gospel of John. This is Be With Me, a podcast. We're going step by step through the Gospel of John. Today's title is, If You Knew a Friend Were Going to Die in a Week, ... So the idea here is, if you knew a friend of yours was going to suffer a betrayal and a crucifixion or some sort of horrible death in a week, what might you do for them? Well, I think you'd have a meal. I think you'd visit. I think you'd have words. I think you'd have expressions of love, maybe gifts, things that are temporary, flowers or words or songs. In this case, there's even going to be smells. They'd have, you try to orchestrate experiences together. And I think you'd facilitate important moments between that person and other people that were also important to them. So I think you would serve them in every way possible, and you'd ask, what could I do for you? Or better yet, you'd think of what you could do for them, and then you'd do it. And when would you do it? You would do it soon. All right, so this is the passage from John chapter 12, verse 1, and this is 6 days before the Passover. Jesus dies on the Passover. Jesus therefore came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, parentheses, he who was about to betray him, close parentheses, said, why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? It's a whole year's wages, a lot of money. He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it. Verse 7, Jesus said, leave her alone so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you will always have with you, but you do not always have me. That's the end of that. So there's a little bit of urgency at the end. So there's this timing, and this is 6 days before the Passover, and he dies on this Passover. This is Jesus' third Passover that's mentioned in John. He's really saying is, hey, next Friday is my last Friday. So Jesus is on the menu this year as the sacrificial Passover lamb. He's going to pay with his life. He is the Lamb of God. He was sent as a sin substitute for the likes of us. He was made like us to help the likes of us. All right, so he's going to go back and forth from Bethany, 2 miles away, in the next couple of days. He's going to pop back and forth until Thursday night. Thursday night is the night of the Last Supper. All kinds of great last teaching. We're going to go through all of it in John. Then he's going to get arrested. He's going to have all these night trials through late Thursday night and Friday, early Friday morning. He's going to be turned over to the Romans on early Friday morning. We call this Good Friday because that's the day of his crucifixion. He dies Friday afternoon. That's confirmed by the centurion. He was taken off the cross by Joseph of Arimathea. And then he was buried in the tomb. He was in the tomb for 3 days, or parts of 3 days, as the Jewish counted it. So a little bit of Friday, all of Saturday, and a little bit of Sunday. And then the resurrection. Now, this is a lot to believe, but we have help with the believing of it because of Lazarus. And he's mentioned here specifically as the one who Jesus raised from the dead. And he's going to call on us to believe next in his own resurrection in about a week's time. And then ultimately, at the time of our death, he's going to call us to hopefully confidently put hope and trust in our own personal resurrection. All right, so I first thought that this party that was had here was in honor of Lazarus, in honor of Lazarus being raised from the dead. But then I never thought about this, is that Jesus had given warnings to the disciples at least 3 times in his ministry that he was going to go to Jerusalem, he was going to be crucified, and this was no surprise to the disciples. So he had prophesied his own death and resurrection a couple of times. And on his last trip, he just flat out tells him, this is it. I'm going to Jerusalem. This is from Matthew 20:17. And as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, so he hadn't even made it there yet, he took the 12 disciples aside, and on the way he said to them, "See, we are going to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and scribes. They will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and he will be raised on the last day." He just tells them flat out, I'm going to Jerusalem. It's a one-way trip. And he's ultimately going to leave Jerusalem only by resurrection. In the meantime, he's telling them, and perhaps more of the inner circle, that he was going to be mocked and flogged and crucified. So I'm speaking to you plainly here. So what kind of a dinner party do you have for a person like this? What might you do on a day when I know that I do have you? Jesus says, look, you're not always going to have me, so what should we do on a day that I do have you? So it helps us understand and appreciate what happens next. It's not, someday I should have a dinner party. Someday I should invite you over. Someday I should be wildly generous and speak sweet words to you. Someday I should facilitate the ability of others to gather and, call that evangelism. Someday I should serve him sacrificially. Someday I could get my hands and my hair dirty for him. If today is not that day, then what day is? They had no time, and we do not have the luxury of time either, in a sense. So just like they did not have for them, they had to hurry, because Jesus said, you will not always have me. And for us, what's our hurry? So here's our hurry, is we will not always have opportunity to have him. So the big theme of John, one of the big themes of John, is to receive him and is to believe. And I think this pushes us to say, when's a good time for that? Well, how about today? You're not going to have me for long. Thanks for listening.